In 2019, I went on a quest to find organizations that actually made sustainable change. And that journey has brought three things. First, Sustainable, Happy, Profit. That's the book, How Products and Organizations in fact can thrive. Two, the Agile Sustainability Manifesto, how we evolve our craft and guide our decisions. And three, the Agile Sustainability Practitioner 4 weeks hands-on program. Before I get ahead of myself, I have organized our time together this way. Kind of a slight diamond shape. So we're going to go beyond diversion and conversion, also leveling up the playing field, hence this diamond shape. And also, for the ones that know liberating structures, with a flavor of the three W's. Section of what, which is the state of affairs. So what, why this matters, why is it significant? And now what, which is the action-oriented section. To get ready for you to tackle as soon as you leave this room. I'm sure you have heard of the global warming and the rather scary predictions. Maybe some of you have read the IPCC report. We could also be looking at our economic forecast and what's to unfold, as well as why GDP is not a good indicator of a healthy economic system, and how, in fact, it's the couple of harming emissions. We could also look at multiple different variables and their correlation with industrial revolution and other things. But what I don't want to do is to add into the overload nor the overwhelm. And in the subject of sustainability, what we have is a really big feedback delay. And we know how that works. Imagine this. If we had a magic switch to turn off all the greenhouse gas emissions right now, it will take decades, if not centuries, to see what we have already emitted into the atmosphere. So here are some questions that I think we should be asking ourselves. How would we feed ourselves? So question for you, who works somehow related to agriculture? Hands up. Look around. This is going to increase year on year. Our food system is a broken, complex, adaptive system, and that's where we come in. Because our current food system doesn't work for everyone, and it certainly does not work for the environment. Petrochemical agriculture has turned agriculture into a leading source of greenhouse gas emissions and pollution, and is driving extinction of species. It has a huge financial cost, not just in biodiversity, but also in health and simply math input, if we look at it in terms of land use, water usage, pollution, energy, taxpayers' money, right? Don't forget subsidies. Not only we produce food in a way that doesn't work in the long term, but we also manage to waste almost a third of it, while nearly 10% of the world's population go hungry. And we, Agile project practitioners, we know we can do better. The questions of how would we harness energy and how are we going to store what we learn? And I ask this because I imagine most of us touch technology in our work. And technology is it's no longer an industry in itself, it's sort of a fabric layer of any business. And IT, information and technology, needs these two things. So we are uncovering better ways of developing technology by doing it and helping others to do it. We need to face this. Data center power surge sixfold, especially AI and quantum computing, are really driving the spike in energy use. Don't forget rare earth materials, water use. And we know, we tried, that the accumulation of data does not drive or lead us to better decision. And the grid is a capacity and can't really handle the forecast. So how do we better respond to change? The question of how would we make things? And I ask these questions because we in the digital space often think that we work in this abstract, non-physical space when we are very bounded to materials and governing laws, regardless if we are aware of it or not, regardless if we like it or not. So if in our work, our aim is to increase predictability and control risk, well, here are some risks. Almost consuming already 2 planet Earths. And if everybody was behaving in the way that we do, in the tiny slither of northwestern side of the world, we would be at the rate of 5 Earths. We need to be more lean and certainly more agile. How would we heal ourselves? That's another question for the room, for you. Who here works somehow related to healthcare? Hands up. Maybe look around. That is one of the fastest growing industries. That includes biotech. A broken, complex, adaptive system. And that is where we come in. Air pollution alone contributes to 3.7 million human deaths a year. And in London alone, 7,000 preventable deaths a year. And it's not just pollution. We know that weather changes has also direct health implication and also fluctuations of diseases. So as practitioners, how can we help such an interdependent and complex industry with huge stresses and demands? Systems thinking, anyone? And allow me to wrap the questions with this one. How would we conduct business? Which affect us, each and every one of us, as stakeholders, as customers, employees, as hopefully active participants of our civic life. And this is the focus of my research and work. And I can tell you one thing. There is a better way to do business. Because our business as usual is the most unusual. The numbers are in. Air pollution, we looked. Also, we push 1 million species threatened with extinction. We have already converted 75% of land not covered by us. And 6 debatable, 7 of the 9 greatest threats to the world are directly related to ongoing destruction of nature, and that destruction made by us, humans, one species. This is our current state of affairs. We can do better. We certainly need to be more lean and agile. So let's pause for a minute. Think so far. What is one thing that has become more apparent? And how is that related to your work? So here is where I introduce you a framework, and we know this can be helpful. On this image here on your right-hand side is the planetary boundaries. And I'm not going to lie, it doesn't look great, but let's not go into despair. It's a great information radiator. Anything that stays within the green area, we are operating in a safe space. Anything we go beyond, we overshoot from what's a safe operating space. Now, yes, it doesn't look great. Let's not go into despair. We have managed already in the past to turn these things at the speed, at the size that is required. So it's good to remind ourselves, if we've done it, we can do it again. Remember the ozone layer? And then part 2 of this framework is the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 legally binding goals, to which they have targets and very specific items within each target. So if you haven't checked that out, I will highly encourage you to go and have a look. Now, some are related to what's called natural capital, some of the things that we look in terms of the planetary boundaries, but also many others are for what's called social capital. Now, we combine these two things, and this is the framework I wanted to introduce here, is the donut economics. And it's called donut economics because it's shape. We have the outer layer, which is our ecological ceiling. We don't want to surpass that. And then the inner circle is our social foundation. We do not want to leave anyone behind in terms of access to food, water, quality, education, peace, justice, political voice. So the dough of this donut is our safe and just space for humanity. This is a framework that is regenerative, is distributed by design, grounded in the real world, not in partial philosophical ideas. And I'm one of the organizations in action for the Donut Economics Action Lab. This framework is collaborative, it's adaptive, it's holistic in terms of economic development that accounts, again, for the real world, not abstract, incomplete concepts. So let me tell you a story. The way that we put these things in practice, it doesn't have to be grandiose, not overly complex. Right here, what you have is some snaps of a session recently that I facilitated, a pendant from an existing conference about tangible application of the donut economics framework. And we had more than 70 attendees. And these sessions, again, don't have to be an all-day thing and complicated. Can be incremental and iterative. So small, start small, learn fast. And often when we look at sustainability from the angle of these two sides, right? This is a politics, it's a population. Population, the masses, the individuals, or politics. And we know that policies and laws have loopholes and are too slow. So with my work and research, what comes apparent is that right in the middle, what we have is a great opportunity, and that's organization. Think about this. We have 249 country codes versus the 333 million registered companies worldwide. So we have structures that we can tap into to go at the speed, at the size that is required. And organizations, companies are composed of individuals. And we can do both. We can do good and we can do well. In fact, it's more rewarding. People, planet, products is a trifecta. Not only that, but we are incredibly privileged. Us for being here today, but also with our work, we have access and we have ease. Access in terms of key areas of the organization and ease of our skills, tools already our under belt. So I do argue that it's our responsibility. I did say I went on a quest. I went on a quest to make my own company better, one person LTD. With this idea that if I could downscale these big concepts and apply to one person LTD, then I will be able to upscale, side scale to others. And through that research, and yes, some patterns, very clear patterns surfaced. I also must admit that it was tough to see how the narratives and the operations were quite dissonant sometimes. Greenwashing? But the ones that I did find, embedding sustainability as a fabric layer rather than an afterthought, had very clear patterns. And that's really where sustainable happy profit came about. A way for me to be able to share those learnings, the specifics, the mechanisms, the strategies, clear patterns, beyond just one customer, one session, one talk at a time. So let me take you quickly through 3 different industries, companies, examples from this quest. So this is a energy company. And within 10 years, they managed to turn around 80 to 20, well, actually more at 85% renewables today. That's a big turn, especially already providing energy to 9.5 million people and expected by 2030, 50 million people. And they did so also by increasing 30% their profits. And one thing that they did was anchor. They anchor so they could change course. So there are many things worth noting on the story, but one specifically I think is helpful to think about is they did an asset inventory list and took every single end of life as an opportunity to put the money where their mouth was. Really valuing that adaptive to change. So this is a servicing a bank, and I think the figures speaks for themselves. What's called ethical portfolios perform better. Imagine if all portfolios were ethical by design, by default. Anyway, aside of halving their emissions, as we all are to do by 2030, also what became clear, it was asking themselves, searching where could they have their biggest impact. That's a question for us, our departments, our products, ours as individuals, but also whole organizations as a whole. Where, aside of halving our emissions, where could we have the biggest impact? And for them was to have very targeted niche fundings. They could have bigger ripple effects doing so. And also they did many partnerships, and they do. One including 150 companies. Imagine the portfolio management there. 150 companies. Also including the WWF. So for me, that really talks about valuing not just customer collaboration, but the whole value chain collaboration. What a lever that can be. So we look energy servicing, and this is manufacturing. So this company not only reduced their absolute emissions by 70%, but also they created their own framework, treating and supporting individuals as problem solvers, coming together and reaching each other's ideas. And it's a huge operation. And I am certain here in the room we have many stories when we in fact value more individuals and interactions. Okay, you are convinced you want to come into this quest with me? Now, you are going to get unfaced resistance. What I want to do now is equip you to how to fight some of the most common myths. First, people don't care. Well, people do care. Workforce, employees, customer, investors eager to find those ethical portfolios. Employees will refuse to work for what used to be called corporate social responsibility, term coming back now. Majority of workforce will refuse if an organization doesn't have that. And for the ones that read and remember the About section of the Agile Manifesto, building the types of organizational communities which we want to work for, we want to be part of. The myth of, ooh, this is expensive, which it may come in many flavors, not having funds or allocated budget and sort of the like excuses. But let's look at what is expensive, because it's official, renewables are cheaper. And not only when you do comparison of kilowatt hour, but also the reduced long-term cost, maintenance, extraction cost, transportation. So that's energy. Looking at materials, 90% of the materials are wasted. Imagine if you keep them in your value chain, and or don't even put some of it to start with. And there is a particular fact that stood with me, which is there is more gold in e-waste, more gold in stuff like this we no longer use, e-waste, more gold in e-waste than left on the ground. I mean, what are we doing? And then the concept of regeneration, right? Leaving it in a better state. We looked at agriculture as an example. Regenerative agriculture not only reduces greenhouse gas emissions, removes carbon or sequesters carbon, keeps it within the soil where it ought to be, increases biodiversity, improves water quality, air, generates higher returns, and is a resilient system. Right? If one of your crops fail over here, you can still feed your nation. Really harnessing that change for competitive advantage. The myth of, well, we are bounded to political and market systems, or in disguise as there's no point to do anything, I don't have enough influence. But let's remind ourselves that political systems respond to people. And through history, we have examples of successfully overcome at extraordinary odds to achieve political change. The myth of, well, but what about the profit and the growth? Well, let's look where growth and profit are going. Because floods alone, example from the 2019 in the US, more than 50 million in the first quarter century of the year lost by floods. And for every 1% increase of severe rainfall, the GDP falls around almost 2%. So literally going down the drain. So that's water. Let's look at fire. Example here from 17 and 18, California. A full quarter century of profits of the insurance industry lost. And we know that there are spaces already uninsurable. And this is not in faraway lands. This is happening here, close, far, and more accentuated and more often. Also globally, 1% of GDP lost a year up in flames. And also, let's not forget shortages. Becoming more apparent, our weaker value chains, conflicts, epidemics, war, supply, logistics. Here are some examples of car companies that they had to shut for 10 days because they didn't have the parts. So if at regular intervals we team need to reflect how to become more effective and then tune and adjust accordingly, we are missing part of the picture. And then the myth of, ooh, it's just too complex. I mean, it's too complex. We're talking about the biosphere. But this is what it's up for grabs. I mean, only by achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, there is 12 trillion. Also, let's remind ourselves that not long ago, our organization managed to adapt, turn around in a fraction of the time at the speed, a change of a magnitude that we wouldn't have been able in other circumstances. So if our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of value, that's what's up for grabs. Carbon tunnel vision. I bring this concept to you because this visual is a great way to depict the current state of affairs. Yes, we ought to reduce our carbon emissions halved within the 4 years. But we also tend to look in this narrow way when we confronting a challenge. In complex adaptive system, there is more to consider than the common sort of narrow inertia. And especially when you look at emissions reductions, it's very easy to fall complacent on your value chain. And the golden rule is that if something is too good to be true, it often is. So I take the opportunity to highlight the organization Stop the Traffic, which I collaborate with, and their sole mission is prevention of human trafficking and modern slavery. And this is closer than you think. It's in our food chain, in our energy, materials, devices, the clothes that we wear, the stuff that we use, and it's also in our healthcare system. Let's take a minute. Question for you. What is becoming more apparent? And how is that related to our work? Right, so hold that thought. I'm going to give you a great networking opportunity. So throughout the day, exchange was becoming more clear, more apparent. How is that related to our work with somebody else you haven't met yet? 120 billion. We have right here 120 billion. And this is a very conservative estimate of the opportunities sitting already in this room. Look around. This is the amount of revenue we could tap into right now. So if we put our head, heart, efforts in the right place, we can make a positive impact. And yes, also a positive impact in the bottom line. Imagine a world where we keep to our core people, planet, purpose by design. So how if, as project professionals, take our own practice up a notch? Because it's as simple as that. Put your money where you want the world to go. Put your money and put your mind, efforts, heart there too. I'm just talking about money. During the 7 years following the Paris Agreement, the top private sector banks pumped extra 5.5 trillion to fossil fuels. So you can tap in organizations like bank.green and find out how is your bank performing? How is your company bank performing? I have personally changed my personal bank, my household, my company one. If you don't like what you see, change it. And you may not be able to change your company one that easily, but you will be armed with facts and details to be able to influence, which is highly part of our daily work. So that's banks. Let's look at pensions. Here in the UK, every £10 you put in your pension, 2 is linked directly to deforestation. And that's not how we think of our pension time. Let alone what happens with the other 8. So you can tap in organizations like Make My Money Matter and find out. And also ask your provider to stop putting your pension money in such a horrid, destructive industry. So that's pension. And also let's not forget insurance. That's also money. Now, if anybody here works in insurance and has actual ethical portfolios for one person LTD, I'd love to talk to you. I'm a circular economy professional from Cambridge University, and I find the concept of circular economy really helps organizations to sort of bring tangibility of these concepts into how do we design our products and services. And you may have come across the circular economy in terms of this 7, 9, 11 R's. But really, what it is moving away from our current linear economy, take, make, waste, meaning we take stuff from Earth, we make stuff with it, and then we waste it, into a much more circular way of thinking. The circular economy has 3 principles. First, keeping products and materials in use for as long as possible. This is what's called the butterfly diagram. In one side of the wings of that butterfly, what we have is sort of the manufacturing thing. So moving from the take, make, waste into keeping all those products and materials in use for as long as possible. And what you can see there is that the very last thing is recycling. And we're lucky if today think recycling as an option or default. But it's the very last thing here because recycling is the most expensive thing you can do in terms of time, effort, finance, transport. So what we want to do is tap into the many other servicing and product opportunities before we get to the recycling phase. And then on the left-hand side here in this image, you have this what's called the biological side of the wing of the butterfly. And as an example, what you have is biogas as a byproduct. Just recently, I looked in things like this. With a customer, we managed to release 2 new servicing revenue lines. The principle of reduce waste and pollution. What we have over here is a partial representation of value stream mapping. And this is a very common Agile practice. And we put so much effort, time across departments, hopefully across your value chain, and also multiple days. And it is fairly organizational and taxing thing to prepare. Also very valuable. Yet to date, when we look at value stream mapping, we only look at reduction of one variable, a reduction of waste. So I think it was 2021 when I first published publicly this idea of taking value stream mapping and all the effort that we're already doing, but yes, look at waste of time, but also look at waste of effort, energy, materials, finance. And with a customer here from the UK, we were looking just at streamlining the return process. And that not only sort of bubbled up the opportunity of resale of just products sitting there doing nothing, but also the reduction of warehouse cost. And the principle 3, which is regenerate natural systems. Really makes me think about this continuous attention to technical excellence and good design from the Agile Manifesto. What you have here as an image is what's called the life principles of biomimicry, which is innovation inspired by nature. Because the solutions to our problems are already here. They have been fine-tuned over the last 3.8 billion years of existence. The solution to our problems are in the living beings, not in the fossils. And the life principles of biomimicry, at its core, what it has, the ethos of creating conditions that are conducive to life. Imagine if all we did was creating conditions conducive to life, regenerate our natural system. And remember our privilege. We have access and we have ease. So where do you want the world to go? How do you want to be part of it? What's between then and now. Therefore, what's next? So if you haven't checked it out yet, please head over to the Agile Alliance, check out the Agile Sustainability Manifesto, and take the pledge. Put your name on it. And most importantly, leverage the 4 Values 8 principle to guide our many decisions we take every day. It's almost 25 years since. It's time for us to take our own practice up a notch. Green Software Foundation, I'm one of the champions for them. And even though you are not in IT, because technology is a fabric layer of any business, what you have here in the QR code is a very well worth, I think, base level free course to open awareness and wider understanding in terms of green software or better ways to define technology. And then last is join us in one of the Agile Sustainability Practitioner Program. So you not only live with knowledge of circular economy, sustainable development goals, and complexity science, but also with experience. That's hands-on 4 weeks experience. And essentially what we're trying to do, we're running this since 2023, is to enable the move from theoretical change, agreement, oh yeah, we need to do something, to actual impactful action. Because that's where we lose people the most in any change, right? The hardest step. So we are here on the question of people from urgency into agency. So allow me to close with this thought. This is home. There are no boundaries. We all breathe the same air. All our conceptual inventions that do not support this home to thrive as a whole are flawed. This is our home, which is not our salon.